Joining me on the latest episode of the Gray Area Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts for free, and also our YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. This is a guy who I've come to know over the last year plus. He is with DallasMavs.com, does everything that you could possibly think of when it comes to Mavs analytics, film study. He does it all pretty much, basically. You can find him on Mavs.com, Bobby Karalla. Bobby, what's going on, man?
Hey, nothing much. Excited to be here. How are you?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you taking some time with me to talk all things Mavericks basketball. It just seems like the season just ended about a month ago because it kind of just ended about a month ago.
Yeah. It's a quick turnaround. I mean, I think 2 weeks ago we were thinking, it probably won't start till like January, February, March. And now it's like, oh yeah, training camp starts next week. So yeah. It's quick.
Yeah. And the Mavericks this past season, of course, went 43-32, got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs by the Los Angeles Clippers. But we saw Luka Doncic really continue his emergence onto the national stage, the world stage, if you will, and to do so for the first time in the NBA playoffs. Although they lost in 6 games, what did you learn about this Mavericks team, not only in their time in the bubble and into the playoffs, but throughout that entire season about what their future looks like in your eyes?
So when you're trying to get to the highest level, right, when you're trying to compete for championships, you need at least one guy who's like all-world level good. I mean, every single team that's ever won a championship has had a guy who's at the top of his craft in the league. And there are a lot of good players. There are very few great players. And the margins between them are very small. But the leap from good to great is probably the toughest one to make, for both players and teams. And Luka in his second season made that jump. And so the way that he played, even despite all of the issues with crunch time performance and health, he missed some time. KP missed a ton of games. There were a bunch of guys on the team that were in and out of the lineup all season. A lot of new faces. A lot of guys who aren't making, too much money that maybe aren't too highly thought of. Like, there were so many question marks with this team all season long that just persisted and persisted. And yet here they were giving the Clippers, who were the title favorite. Of course, we knew what happened to them in the next round, but giving them a real run for their money. And it was because of Luka, finished top 5 in MVP voting, started the All-Star game, first team All-NBA. I mean, he is just a monster. And so that's what I learned about them this season from the furthest perspective possible, is that Luka is ready to be that guy. And now the team, and it starts with this offseason and every offseason really from here until the end of Luka's career, hopefully, is, how do we make the same jump that Luka just did? So Luka went from good to great, from great to elite in about 6 months. And the Mavs, put players around him and continue running an offensive system and all of those things that will help enable him to lead them to the promised land. And some of that is just health and better luck with Porzingis and some of these other guys. But some of it, too, is making moves, draft night, trades, free agency. I mean, they're kind of on the clock because you don't know how long you have these players for. You don't know how long they're going to be, one of the best players in the league. Who knows? So you got to take advantage of it while you can, especially while he's on his rookie deal. So what I learned about them this season is that Luka is that guy, and now the team kind of realizes, like, okay, we have to kick it into hyper gear now because we don't want to waste any time.
Yeah, and it's funny because, and I've tell people this all the time, it's like, look, I think we knew that Luka Doncic was going to be taking the next step and becoming a talented, gifted basketball player in terms of his skill and his overall knowledge of the game. I don't know about you, Bobby, but I don't think we saw this coming in year number 2. You saw flashes of what he was in his rookie year, but did you see this quantum leap that he took coming at the beginning of the year, given how good he was, as you mentioned, first time, starting the All-Star game, top 5 MVP, first team All-NBA. Did we see that coming, though, from him?
Well, so go back to after they traded for Porzingis 2 seasons ago now, when they traded like their entire starting lineup except for Luka. And the rest of that season, and now granted, it was his rookie year. He didn't really have an off season because he was, playing with Madrid up until May or June. But for that 2 or 3 months after the trade deadline, he just looked exhausted and overwhelmed And, he is surrounded by guys who are like, okay, these guys aren't starting caliber players. Well, they brought almost all of those guys back and didn't add many other, of course they added KP, but they didn't add many other new faces. And so the Luka we saw at the end of his rookie year, just worn out, kind of beaten down, real frustrated. We thought, okay, they really have to upgrade in terms of talent around him. Otherwise, who knows if he'll ever get any better than just kind of like really flashy passer, kind of inefficient, and maybe not the lead dog. But he comes back this year. I mean, his body was kind of transformed. He was quicker. He was more explosive, much better around the rim. And so he didn't his three-point percentage was still kind of poor. His free throw percentage, I know, still drives people crazy. I mean, he didn't make massive improvements to his game, but he just got a little better at everything. And that was the difference between him being, 28-7, kind of 42% from the field to holy crap, this guy is the next LeBron good. And that's what I was saying before. I mean, the margins are so thin. And now the question is, like Dirk got better every year, LeBron gets better every year. Even now, if Luka gets any better, then he alone will be good enough to help this team overcome all of its other shortcomings. I mean, that is kind of the air that he's reached. But no, I didn't see him doing this in 1 year. And I didn't really even expect as high as I was on him. And I was like the captain of the Luka is going to be an incredible player fan club coming out of the draft. I didn't think that he was going to be like this, MVP caliber player. I just didn't see it coming. And I mean, maybe that's just stupid, looking like an idiot now. But I mean, he was amazing in Real Madrid and all that stuff. But I thought, okay, he could be like Manu Ginobili, really, really good player. Where
that's Hall of Famer right there too.
Yeah. But never Manu was never going to win the MVP,
right? Yeah.
But everybody knew this guy he's probably the Spurs' best player. Post 2005, basically when Duncan started to age a little bit, it was kind of the Manu and Tony Parker show. And I thought maybe, okay, KP can be kind of the Duncan guy, the main guy, he's like the leading scorer and Luka's just going to get a bunch of assists. But no, Luka averaged 30 points a game. I mean, it was unbelievable. Yeah. It was unbelievable. It came out of nowhere really, but I think it just once again kind of reinforces we cannot put a ceiling or a limit on what Luka can be, because every single time we do, he just finds a way to surpass even our wildest expectations.
Yeah, it's just an incredible second season. And now as he fully takes the reins and is in full command of this team, looking at the parts around him, obviously Kristaps Porzingis dealing with a meniscus injury will miss the start of this upcoming season. But other guys around them, we're talking about the Tim Hardaways of the world, the Seth Currys of the world, Maxi Kleber, these parts, Dwight Powell coming off of an Achilles injury. Are the Mavericks, as currently constructed, a team that can get themselves to the top four of the Western Conference? Or are there decisions like with Tim Hardaway, Willie Cauley-Stein, and others, those decisions are going to have to be made, whether to keep with them or to move on from them in order to get to that upper echelon of the West?
Well, I mean, the difference between where they finished, so they finished 7th place in the West this year. The difference between them and 4th place ended up being a game or two. I mean, so it was so thin. And so you think, okay, well, Houston and OKC are going to be worse, probably. So then, sure, yeah, I mean, they could easily be a top 4 seed. But, are they going to have the best offense of all time again? If KP is going to miss a month, is he going to come back and be really great? Or is he going to need to take some time to kind of work his way back into shape and rhythm and everything? Because you only get 72 games, and they're cramming it into 4.5 months.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to afford a bad 2-week stretch, or if Luka misses 2 weeks, it's going to hurt even more. So the margins are going to be really thin again, and with fewer games, every game means that much more. So all these late game situations, they've got to be better there. But I think with a guy as good as Luka, you're always going to have a chance to be a home court team. But they definitely they need to add something. You got to add something, even if it's just one guy, who's not an all-star, but just getting some new blood in here, upgrading the defense just a little bit, because you can't count on having the best offense of all time. Again, I mean, you just cannot have that be our game plan is to just break records. You have to be able to get stops when they matter, especially in the playoffs. And so upgrading on the defensive end has got to be paramount, even if it means maybe taking a slight step back on offense, because if you look at teams who get home court, teams who go on playoff runs, and especially teams who win the championship, these are teams that are top 10, top 12 in defense. Last year, the Mavs were, I think, 18th. and they were in the 20s for much of the year. So I mean, that's not going to cut it, and they know that. So they have to upgrade there. And if they do, especially if that guy or those guys that they get to upgrade on defense, if they can also shoot or score around the rim, or if they can do something on offense, then you're not really missing a beat on offense, and you are just upgrading on defense. And then that's whenever you can really make some hay. But that's going to be the key. Is yes, they can. I mean, just from an arithmetic standpoint, they could be top 4 because of how tight those windows were last year between all these teams. But I mean, you can't count on just hitting a buzzer beater whenever Luka missed buzzer beaters. I mean, you can't count on just having better luck in the clutch. You have to help create better luck. The way you do that is get stops throughout a game, and the way you do that is upgrading on defense. So, they don't have to overhaul the roster or anything in order to be top 4, but they do have to add 1 or 2 guys that can go out there and get you a stop when you need it.
And you kind of touched on it and alluded to it a little bit. The Mavs last season were 17-24 in those clutch situations. Their improvement in those times are going to be paramount. And you talked about kind of the margins of how slim they are in winning in this league. Those kinds of differences there can be the difference between being a 7 seed and a 2 seed in the Western Conference if you play better down the stretch in some of these games. And as we look toward not only free agency, which we'll touch on here in a little bit, obviously the NBA draft is coming up, and the Mavericks have a real opportunity at 18 and 31 in this year's NBA draft to make some opportunities in terms of impact players there. One, do you think they stay at the 18th overall pick? And if they do, what kind of player would you like to see this team potentially select to try and build around this young core?
So as for will they stay there or not, I mean, all the rumors are that they're listening to anybody and everybody. So we'll see. But that could be pick for player. I mean, there was a report last week where they're trying to move up. So I mean, who really knows what to expect? But I would be at this point. I would almost be surprised if they do keep it, just because of all the hot gossip. But if they stay, or if they, let's say, trade up or trade back or whatever, like assuming they have a pick in the first round, I'd like to see them get a guy who can defend. Granted, all the players who have defense in the strengths column of their scouting report are projected to go like in the top 10. So, if you stay in the middle of the first round, especially in a draft like this, you're much more likely to get a guy who is 19, 20 years old, still very raw, but has a lot of athleticism. I mean, there are a lot of guys, like local guy, RJ Hampton, for example, super duper athlete. Josh Green from Arizona, super duper athlete. There are a lot of guys who are in that range, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", who can really move, but they're just so raw offensively. And so I think that's kind of what you're going to kind of get if you stay at 18. There are also some guys who are more like kind of project style players, like Alexei Pokusevski, who played in the Greek league. He's a Serbian guy. He's a project, but he could be like a magical player, but that's 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
So that's probably what to expect if you stay there. But I would like them to invest, I think, in a wing if possible. Again, it's they go at a premium, like Sadiq Bey, for example, from Villanova,
that's
year, and Patrick Williams from Florida State too. Those two guys are like, yeah, they'll be mid to late first round picks, and now all of a sudden, like, Patrick Williams is going to go in the top 10. Sadiq Bey is like going in the lottery. So 3-and-D wings come at a premium, and if you want to get one, you usually have to trade up now. I mean, that's just the way of the world. So I would love for them to get one of those guys, but so would everybody else. So we'll see if they do that. But ideally, they come out of the draft with a guy who can defend from day one, and then you can work on everything else, kind of like Dorian Finney-Smith, for example, a few years ago.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of my favorites in this draft, Sadiq Bey out of Villanova, a real heady player. Jay Wright, high basketball IQ guys, of course, a Villanova guy that the Mavs already have in Jalen Brunson. I think, obviously those connections there. But, yeah, these guys, when you start thinking about 3-and-D players, especially in today's league where perimeter defense is at an all-time high with everyone, it seems like, being able to stretch the ball and shoot the ball further and further away from the three-point line, your ability to defend out on the perimeter is paramount these days. So as you look toward free agency, obviously we've seen some things start to happen in the NBA trade market. Chris Paul going to the Phoenix Suns, Drew Holiday fetching 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps for the New Orleans Pelicans and the Milwaukee Bucks.
It's insane, man. It's insane.
Okay, so let me touch on this real quick. So it made me think, So Drew Holiday fetches nearly as much as Anthony Davis did when he went to the Los Angeles Lakers. To me, that's insane to me. What did you think about that trade?
It's a steep price to pay, and it's not just the picks too. I mean, like George Hill can really play.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Bledsoe, he kind of had a down year, but normally he can really play too. I mean, that's a lot to give up, but if it helps you keep your guy and it helps you keep your guy happy, then it's worth it. And so, we'll see. The Supermax deal, I don't think he has to sign that for another week or whatever. But I mean, if that works out for them, then kudos. But those picks that they gave up, I mean, the latest one I think was 2027, unprotected. 7 years from now, Giannis will be like 35 or something. I mean, I don't know. That's a lot. That's a lot. But hey, I mean, Robert Covington got traded for a couple first-round picks last year. I mean, like first-round picks, they're flying all over the place now. Whereas a couple years ago, it seemed like a first-round pick was like worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, you made one All-Star team. Here's 5 first-rounders. It's really weird how quickly that's changed.
I saw a tweet from NBA writer Royce Young of ESPN. He said, look, Sam Presti, the GM of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and David Griffin out there in New Orleans are creating trade pick inflation. Like everybody's going to expect now to get first-round picks for these guys that they decide to trade. It's just like you're not going to really ever get, I would think, 3 first-rounders and 2 pick swaps for Drew Holiday. That's kind of, insane. But, I mean, here we are in this trade market. And you kind of touched on the guy that, of course, a lot of Mavs fans want to see in a Mavs uniform with Kristaps and Luka Doncic and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Is that kind of now, I won't say officially, but the likelihood of that, while it was slim to begin with, is that pretty much a done deal given what the Milwaukee Bucks have done? Or do you think there's still a chance that this could still happen?
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. As it relates to the Mavs, I really have no idea. But, I mean, just Giannis generally, like, you go into the offseason saying we need a talent upgrade. Well, Milwaukee gave you more talent. No matter what you think about Drew Holiday, Bogdanovich, those are 2 really good players, hard-nosed guys, competitors. Bogdan won in Europe kind of at the same levels as Luka. So he's that kind of caliber player coming from over there. So, I mean, I think Giannis will probably maybe stay. I mean, that's kind of the optimism is high that he'll stay in Milwaukee or at least re-up, sign that contract. That doesn't mean you're untradeable. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think that not just the Mavs. I mean, there were a ton of teams that are reportedly have interest. Like if you have an interest in a superstar whose team just like gave him significant talent upgrades, then maybe you're thinking like, okay, well, maybe we'll move on to the next thing.
Right?
Yeah. But, I mean, we'll see. Crazier things have happened. Like LeBron, for example, in 2010, the Cavs added a bunch of talent, and he still left too. So, I mean, anything can happen. You just kind of have to let the chips fall.
Yeah. So let's focus on this upcoming season, a team that has a real chance to make a real impact and potentially get into the top 4 of the Western Conference. Looking at the other parts of this team, Tim Hardaway, Dwight Powell, Seth Curry, Maxi Kleber, who on this team for you from last year's team really has an opportunity to take that next step and really solidify themselves as the next 2 or 3 players that, hey, these are the young guys that we're going to roll with, and these are the guys that are going to be part of our future to help us win a championship here?
Well, Tim had a career year last year, and to be fair, a lot of the guys on the team had a career year last year, and that's another reason why you got to add more talent because you can't bank on everybody having the best year of their career at the same time. But, we saw Hardaway, like whenever he was on, the Mavs were so tough to beat because, Luka and KP are going to give you a bunch. So if Tim is on or Seth, really they kind of like trade. But if you can get 18, 20 a night from Tim, like relatively efficiently, 40% from 3, then you can fill it up, and that's going to be important. But it doesn't really fall to me, and especially in a year like this, condensed season with KP out for, they say, Donnie said January 1st is the day they want him to get back on the court, which means, another couple of weeks until he finally plays, I would imagine after that. I mean, if you're going to be without him for a month or so, and you're playing 72 games in 5 months, I mean, you really need everybody to step up because one injury, you're missing like 4 games, whereas normally you'd miss maybe 2 or 3. So you need it from players 1 through 17, all the way down to the 2-way guys, because, with one star already out, injuries, you're going to miss more time. It's really an all hands on deck situation. I would say KP missing time maybe gives Maxi Kleber another chance. You know, he started in the playoffs, and I know he was really disappointed with his shooting performance. Defensively, I thought he did a pretty good job against Kawhi, as good as you can do for like a 6'10" big guy. But you know, they need him to be more consistent from three for sure. So if you know, Tim can kind of replicate what he did last year, and Maxi maybe takes a step forward, and of course Dwight Powell coming back from Achilles, they need him to be the Dwight Powell he was last year, you know, because he's like a huge driving force of that offense. And especially without KP, you need somebody to help take pressure off Luka whenever he's driving the lane. So that'll be big. And then whoever they get in free agency, I mean, they need to add one or two guys, I think, because with already one guy sidelined, you need as much depth as possible. And depth has been a hallmark of this team for a really long time. But we saw in the playoffs, you can go from a super deep team like the Mavs were to all of a sudden, if you get two or three guys banged up, then you're not deep at all. Then you only have like 5 or 6 guys who you can roll out there and play. So they need all hands on deck and everybody to take a step up. And that includes guys like DeLon Wright and Justin Jackson, who are like at the end of the rotation. If they come back, you know, they better be ready to play. Courtney Lee, same thing. So we'll see. But, yeah, I mean, it starts with Tim and then Maxey kind of replacing KP's minutes for a while. Those two in particular really have to have just outstanding years for this thing to keep rolling.
Yeah. Give me 2 or 3 names who we have kind of bantered about a little bit as far as reports are concerned. I'm talking about the Oladipos of the world, the Zach LaVines, the Spencer Dinwiddies of the world. When you hear some of those names, you say, that name or two could help this team and fit in. Who would be those guys in your mind?
Of the guys reported, honestly, I mean, I could talk myself into all of them, but I mean, there's kind of, I guess the reason that these guys are available is because there are kind of maybe some flaws with them. You know, like a guy like Drew Holiday, pretty flawless player, one of the best defenders in the league, just doesn't fit their timeline. But a guy like Oladipo, coming off 2 like really injury-plagued seasons, shooting percentages kind of dipped a little bit. So it's kind of almost like a reclamation project for a former All-Star, which, I mean, the Mavs are very good at working with those kind of guys. But that doesn't come without risk. And then somebody like Zach LaVine, a great shooter, great scorer, but he's played for a team that's been out of the playoffs for like almost his entire career, basically. And so, you know, can he do the good stats, bad team? Will that translate, you know, over to a good team? And also, could he improve on defense a little bit? But we'll see. The rumor the other day about 18 for Lou Williams, that was kind of interesting to me.
Okay.
And I know that, like, okay, Bobby, you just said Zach LaVine, you know, doesn't defend. Well, Lou Williams isn't known for his defense either, but he can score in crunch time, man. I mean, they need somebody like that. And, you know, I don't want to be too all in on Lou Williams because that could just be like a totally fake rumor. But, I mean, look at the difference that Trey Burke made to the Mavs last season whenever they signed him. Just a really quick point guard, shifty, can get out, pull up, drive the lane, you know, can shoot the 3-ball a little bit. I mean, Lou Williams is like that, only has done it for 15 years and averages 20 a game. I mean, he's like turbocharged Trey Burke, and we saw the huge impact that somebody with that kind of quickness and aggression can have on the team. And so somebody like that, even though, again, it doesn't address your main need, which is defense, but, you know, if you trade for that guy, then you can still go out and use your mid-level on a defender, which I think is the best kind of course of action. But if you can get somebody like that who can create his own shot, create for others, run point guard, play off the ball, do a little bit of everything, and also who you can rely on in crunch time, because obviously we know that was a huge problem last year, then I think that's knocking out like 5 birds with one stone, and that would really kind of go a long way in keeping this offense so dominant.
Lemon Pepper Lou in Dallas. That would be something else to see.
Yeah, and it would be great stories too. Great story. I know he would enjoy himself here.
This organization has seen a departure in Steven Silas, who is now the head coach of the Houston Rockets. And obviously, Rick Carlisle's coaching tree. I think one of the more underrated parts of Steven Silas going to Houston is that Rick Carlisle's coaching tree continues to grow when you start thinking about guys like Dwayne Casey, Terry Stotts now, you know, Steven Silas and others. Is Rick Carlisle, and I know this may sound like a silly question, but I'm interested to hear your answer on this. Is Rick Carlisle still the right coach for this basketball team, given what appears to be the direction that they are headed in with a young superstar in Luka Doncic and also a really good number 2 in Kristaps Porzingis to lead them to where they think that they can go?
I mean, the results have been good. He was committed to the rebuild basically from the time, like 2016, they made the playoffs. They won 42 games, really old team. A lot of guys left. It was a huge turnover. And he said, I want to stick it out. So I think that those years where there were a lot of guys coming in, I think he learned a lot about coaching younger players and kind of like relating to them because for so long, even going back to whenever he was in Detroit and then Indiana, I mean, those were kind of older, veteran, tougher teams. And times have changed. I mean, that was like 20 years ago. But the Mavs got so much younger, and he admitted like it was a huge kind of adjustment that he had to make because these guys communicate differently, they respond differently. Rick is, kind of he can be like an old school coach, like real in your face and sort of demanding the way that some of these other coaches are. And I think he had to maybe make some adjustments, communicating with Luka and KP and these younger guys, and it's worked. And they had the number one offense in the league. They put on a great show in the playoffs, ultimately bowed out a little bit. But, I don't know. I mean, I guess any coach's job security is kind of tied to how his players feel about him, especially how his star players feel about him.
Yeah.
Rick is clearly one of the most respected coaches in the NBA. Every coach talks glowingly about him. His assistant coaches keep getting hired as head coaches. And now, Steven Silas had a great career before coming to Dallas, but still he got hired because he coached the number one offense in the league. I mean, let's be real. So, the results are there. I think that Rick has done a pretty good job of kind of like adjusting his coaching style and leaning into Luka, leaning into KP, and really sort of like maybe ceding some control to Luka, not yelling at him if he does something crazy. I mean, just like rolling with the punches a little bit. All that stuff is really important. So, if there were questions about it, I feel like he's done a pretty good job of answering them. But I mean, hey, we've seen Hall of Fame coaches, move on because their star player just doesn't like him. So I mean, anything can happen. But I think that Rick has done a really good job of kind of, becoming a little more new school and kind of empowering the young guys to learn from their mistakes, grow, improve, and kind of leave their own fingerprints on the team. He can be like a very controlling guy with his offense, as we saw with Rondo and so many other guys over the years. But if there's one thing you learn from guys like Jason Kidd along the way, it's like if you have a truly great player and a great basketball mind, it's okay to like take a back seat and let them drive the car. And Luka's done that. And, Rick's adjustment, I think, has been integral to that for sure.
Last couple questions before we get you out of here. I'm curious to know your answer on this too. With Luka Doncic, obviously we know how talented of a player he is, how gifted of a player he is, and what he continues to do in terms of his leaps in his game. Is Luka Doncic the kind of player that will be demonstrative enough to bend the will of the Mavericks organization to his a la LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and others to ensure that he's continuously putting pressure on Donnie Nelson and Mark Cuban to build a championship roster around him to keep him as a Dallas Maverick for years to come?
I mean, I guess it kind of depends. I mean, guys go about that differently. Like Jimmy Butler, that thing in Minnesota was just like insane. Like, I don't think Luka will ever do something like that where he'll just come into practice and just torch the starters with the backups. Like, I don't think that kind of thing will happen. Other guys are a little more cryptic. Like LeBron is like posting Instagram, stories of selfies in the mirror, like that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's really Luka's personality, but I mean, after the playoffs this past year, he basically said like, yeah, it was cool, but like we need to win now, so I think a guy like Luka, who's won at every level he's ever played at, you can only lose for so long before you kind of get fed up with it. And so I think that the pressure's already there. And Luka's agent, Bill Duffy, is he's a big time power broker agent. And so I'm sure that, the Mavs are getting nudged from a bunch of different directions on this. And KP too. I mean, like KP is trying to win as well. And, so it's coming from every direction. But as far as like, will Luka be like, storm into Donnie Nelson's office and say like, you need a trade for some guy that I'm really good friends with? I don't know if he'll do that. But I mean, you never really know until it happens or doesn't. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, I mean, star players have that level of power. I mean, and they all exercise it. So we'll soon find out if things don't go according to plan the next couple of years.
Yeah. What's your outlook on this team for this upcoming season? Coming off an exciting year, really in terms of a development, taking that next step. What's your outlook on the 2020-2021 NBA season for the Dallas Mavericks?
Definitely playoffs. You know, the West is still strong. Fortunately, some guys are finally moving to the East, which is pretty sweet. But I mean, with Golden State back, I mean, it's going to be tough. Portland got better with Covington. You know, I mean, their team's taking a step forward, but I definitely think you got to make the playoffs. I mean, that's a given. Home court would be fantastic, but a lot of that relies on things we've talked about already: health, availability, what kind of moves are they going to make. The only thing that is like, okay, well, this could potentially go wrong or whatever is with such a short offseason and kind of like an uncertain timeline the whole time, you got to hope that everybody has done a really good job of staying in shape, staying fit, staying healthy. And I know everyone's immediately thinking Luka, which is fair. But I mean, whether or not he's, you know, eating hamburgers, or I know he's posting like healthy food pictures on his Instagram all the time, you know, he assumes so much responsibility on offense, and his usage is so high, and he runs so many pick and rolls and takes such a beating. I mean, he's so involved in the offense, and they're playing 4 or 5 games a week this year, probably, you know, with only a 5-day All-Star break. So it's not like you're getting like a week and a half off like you normally would. So things are going to be condensed, and if you're not in tip-top shape, and if you haven't taken care of your body, then things could go sideways. And every team is probably going to be worrying about that. But it does matter a lot for the Mavs because so much of their success hinges on one guy, and he basically handles the ball for every single possession. And so they need him, and they need everybody else to be in shape. But, yeah, I mean, my outlook on the season, assuming nothing crazy happens, no, like, massive trades that no one saw coming or anything, you know, I think that I got to watch my words, but, like, they're a lock for the playoffs, I would think, for sure. And then from there, you know, a success to me would be like win a series, you know, and put up a heck of a fight in the second round. Anything beyond that is gravy, but you have to start seeing them take the steps forward, not only to keep these guys engaged and to keep Luka happy and to keep everyone's confidence high, but also to attract the eyeballs of other guys around the league, because we know next offseason is kind of like the make it or break it one. So we'll see. But, yeah, that's kind of my outlook. I'm cautiously optimistic that they'll be able to do something here, but, you know, hopefully I'm not wrong.
Yeah. It should be a very interesting season for this Mavs team coming off of the success last year. Luka Doncic vaulting himself into that top 5 MVP voting, and also one of the best players in the NBA right now. Also, a lot to look forward to if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan. Bobby, where can they find you on social media, sir?
Twitter at Bobby Karalla, and I'm nowhere else. I'm Instagram if you want to, but yeah, but Twitter is where if you like basketball tweets, then follow me on Twitter for sure.
Bobby does a fantastic job. All things for the Mavs at Mavs.com, digital content production. He does it all for the Dallas Mavericks, and should be an exciting one for him this upcoming season as the Mavs get back on the floor. The NBA gets back on the floor on December 22nd. Bobby, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it, man. And hopefully I'll be seeing you, you know, at some point in 2021 with the games at the AAC here this year.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it.